Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, we're discussing the political crisis in the Republic of Senegal, a country in West Africa on the Atlantic Ocean coastline. It's bordered by Mauritania to the north, Mali to the east, Guinea to the southeast, and Guinea-Bissau to the southwest. The country's been in the news in recent times because of a presidential election scheduled for February 25th, which has been postponed to December 15. President Macky Sall, whose second term ends on April 2nd, had initially announced an indefinite postponement to the polls, saying there was need to resolve a dispute over eligibility of presidential candidates. He said he wanted to leave the country stable and peaceful. So lawmakers extended the polls by 10 months. The opposition has decried the announcement, and anti-government protests have thrown the country into more turmoil. Last week, demonstrators in the capital, Dakar, fought running battles with security forces, throwing stones and burning tires. One student died on Friday in the city of Saint Louis. President Macky Sall says he's not planning to run for office again, but his latest move has critics thinking he's planning to cling on to power or playing the role of godfather to whoever succeeds him. There is speculation he has delayed the elections because he's not confident about the popularity of Prime Minister Amadou Ba. The candidates for President Sall's Benno Bokk Yakaar coalition, which has been approved by the Constitutional Council. One opposition leader, Khalifa Sall, has described the election delay as a constitutional coup. Opponents warned that Senegal's reputation as a bastion of democracy in an unstable region of West Africa is on the line. Speaking of Ecowas and what the group has done about this, it released a statement on Monday last week expressing concern over the situation in Senegal and reminding them of the provisions in the country's constitution which reminds the population and political class of the responsibility to maintain peace and stability in the country. Ecowas encouraged the political class to take steps urgently to restore the electoral calendar in accordance with the provisions of Senegal's constitution. Let's not forget that ECOWAS has its hands full as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger announced weeks ago they were leaving the community. The Ministerial Security Council held an extraordinary meeting on Friday, stressing the need for diplomacy and unity in the face of regional challenges. Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar, who's also chair of the MSC, said the decision by the countries, that's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, to withdraw from ECOWAS has presented another challenge. But the members are heartened by the spirit of cooperation to resolve the challenge that upholds the values of the community. He also underscored the detrimental impacts withdrawal of the three countries could have on their citizens. It reinforced ECOWAS' commitment to dialogue, diplomacy, and reconciliation as the cornerstone of its approach to resolving disputes within the community. I want to bring in former Permanent Secretary at the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi joins us from Abuja. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Amarachi.
Do you think that President Macky Sall understands the political turmoil he's led his country into with the postponement of the elections?
Of course, he's completely aware of what he has done. He's in the driver's seat, driving the process. The vote in Parliament was conducted by his party members. It was the president who ordered the security forces to get the opposition out of Parliament so that his team and vote for an extension of his tenure. So he is the master planner, he's the master quote-unquote strategist. He's the brain behind the whole operation and the whole process of not having an election. And as he rightly said, between now and December, things could still change. And it's so unfortunate when you come to think of what's going on in Senegal today. Very, very unfortunate, if not heartbroken, particularly for this region. As you said in your intro, Senegal has been the most stable. I don't think there's been any coup attempt or military rule in Senegal. They've managed to at least keep the democratic process or the democratic trajectory going on since independence. And for a man who started relatively well and, acknowledged by virtually everybody, to want to end so sadly, sometimes you begin to wonder, what is it in this power that African leaders are reluctant to let go when their tenure ends? It's such a shame to start with. And you remember, I think in your program and one other network, I did ask the question during the Niger crisis, that following what was happening at that time in Senegal and to some extent in Cote d'Ivoire, I continuously ask the question, if a coup happened or does happen in Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire, will anybody be surprised? Because it is the leadership at the end of the day, the leaders that precipitate or that make it attractive for the military to leave the barracks and strike because of simply their inability to quit office or their inability to do the right thing when in office. And this is where we found us. Everybody has found itself now with regards to Senegal. It's simply unfortunate that, Max Saleh is doing this to his people. Very, very unfortunate.
And it is interesting because the president, Macky Sall, is, he emerged as a result of a near political crisis in Senegal. I believe this was back
Absolutely.
in 2012. So we've seen this before happening in the country, and it almost seems like we're at the brink of it happening again. Now, there were protests last week against the announcement that he made. First of all, he announced an indefinite postponement on the elections, and then he announced a final date of December 15. His opponents think that this is a ploy to hold on to power. I mean, we've seen it before. So how is this any different from what is currently happening in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger, considering that those countries are now being ruled by a junta? Well, God forbid the military takes over in Senegal, but isn't this, the perfect scenario for an almost forceful takeover of power in the country?
If there's anything like a political coup, this is certainly one. If there's anything like a political coup, we all talk of military coup, military takeover. But if there's something like a political coup, this is simply one that has been enacted in Senegal. You did mention that he came in as a result of crisis. You've forgotten that the man in Cote d'Ivoire came in as a result of similar crisis. And when his tenure was over, he did exactly the same thing that Saleh is trying to do today in Senegal. So it goes back to the question I asked before. What is it in this power that African leaders find it difficult to relinquish power when their tenure is over and begin to do all kinds of what in the land of my ancestors they will call mango, everybody, trying to find a way to extend, their tenure in power. The president before him, what's the old man's name? Did something similar. Wad, exactly. Thank you very much. Did exactly the same thing. And I know today that part of the crisis is that the same word is trying to bring his son, into the political equation. So this is, it is difficult to understand. And then people will now begin to say democracy is failing No, democracy is not failing in this part of the world. It is the leaders that are failing because the people want to vote. Given the demonstrations going on in Senegal, the opposition to his third-term agenda, the people really want to vote. It is the leaders that do not want the people to vote, or they want the people to vote as per what they want.
It is interesting, and I'm glad that you also mentioned, that his son, he's also trying to bring in his son, but he does have a successor in mind, and there are, talks in some quarters that, he doesn't have enough confidence in this person. I think the current Prime Minister, Amadou Ba, if I'm correct, he doesn't have enough confidence in him taking over power. But let's look at ECOWAS' response to what is going on in Senegal. ECOWAS released a statement on Monday. It's a communique from the West African states saying that they're concerned, but that the Senegalese constitution reminds the people and the political class of their responsibility to maintain peace and stability in the region. The ECOWAS Commission encourages the political class to take steps urgently to restore the electoral calendar in accordance with the provisions of Senegal's constitution. They also say in these trying times for the country and the region, the Commission calls on all stakeholders to shun violence and all other actions that may further disturb peace and stability in the country, urging law enforcement agencies to exercise utmost restraint and protect fundamental rights of all citizens. ECOWAS also says it will continue to engage with the government and all the people of Senegal in their efforts to sustain democracy in the region. What are your thoughts on this statement? Because I'm reading it, and personally, I think that this really isn't as hard hitting as it should be.
I wish them well in their engagement, Amarachi. But they are going nowhere with any engagement. No, that statement alone indicates the dilemma that ECOWAS today finds itself. That statement alone indicates the dilemma that ECOWAS finds itself. That statement also indicates the global trend. When a very strong country or a big nation within a region or within the global, system misbehaves, there's always a problem of how do you deal with this country to start with, without rocking the boat generally. You remember what happened in the case of Ukraine, when the Russians invaded Ukraine. You saw the response of the West. Yeah. Today the war is still going on 2.5 years after, or just a little over 2 years. Nobody has been able to come out to say this is what we are going to do to Russia to stop the invasion. No. And here ECOWAS finds itself in a similar situation. It certainly has no plan. It has no idea of how to deal with this situation in Senegal. Because of the fear also that if it pushes too hard, who knows what will happen. If you go back to history, it took a lot of persuasion. It took a lot of convincing. Even Nigeria went as far as to bringing Senegal, offering him an honorary PhD, I think in Ibadan or Lagos, to persuade him to allow Senegal to be a member of ECOWAS. Just to let you know exactly how the leaders at that time managed to get Senegal into ECOWAS, because the then president was not too enthused about ECOWAS at that time. It took a lot of persuasion. And I can understand the dilemma ECOWAS finds itself today, that they need to be very, very careful, diplomatic in handling this issue so that they do not find Senegal also, wanting to become as rascally as the other the other 3 regions are saying that the best way out of their situation is to threaten to leave ECOWAS. So it's a big dilemma for ECOWAS itself. But ECOWAS itself needs to put in place a monitoring unit or an intelligence unit that they are in a position to predict what could happen and then begin to have a plan, a scenario of what they could do if it happens. Because the situation in Senegal, it's not new. We all virtually saw it coming. Not that we expected that the president would do this, but we knew there would be crisis at the end of his tenure because he was determined to stay. It took him a long time before he decided he was not going to run again. Yeah. And that should have told us that this man has not given up that ambition or that hope of extending his tenure. So it's a big dilemma for ECOWAS, I must confess.
Well, President Macky Sall is still in Dakar. We have already established as a man who said he has no intentions of staying another term in office. I mean, he's done 2 terms, second term expiring on April 2nd. What do you think could change between now and the December dates that he has set?
a lot could happen. Number one, more people could be disqualified. Number two, he might decide that given the circumstances, he would continue to stay in power. You know, we've seen these things in different countries. Remember, halfway down the line, even in Nigeria, President Babangida initiated how many years transitional program, which he ended up banning everybody until there were no more people to be banned and a new set of actors. Even then, the election was annulled. So you can almost predict these scenarios, you know, these events happening all over and over again in this region. His preferred successor that you said he has no confidence, I think is the Prime Minister. He also is not happy that the election was, yes, I think he also is not happy the way the election was postponed and what has been going on. So there's certainly going to be some little disagreement between both sides. And that is like to create another problem domestically. But look, I think the solution is for ECOWAS to really engage all the parties, whether in Mali, in Niger, or in Burkina Faso, now in Senegal. ECOWAS need to get, you know, and do some footwork on these issues, because honestly, the way it is, there's practically no better solution than taking a visit to all these countries and begin to persuade all the parties to come back to the negotiating table and hold an early election. Leaving it till December, I can assure you, is too dangerous.
It kind of seems so that it might be dangerous and anything could happen within that time. But we already established, ECOWAS already said it is engaging, with these countries. ECOWAS is still monitoring what's going on in Senegal. ECOWAS is engaging with the junta in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, and in the coming weeks we should be hearing something. I mean, we don't hear anything from ECOWAS until it releases its communiques. But there are many who believe that Nigeria is ECOWAS. I mean, the headquarters is here in Abuja. Nigeria has a big role, it appears, to play, in this. I know you've mentioned before what a former president did, but looking at the current president and the current presidency that we have in Nigeria, the current governance, do you think that it is possible to rein in these, I don't want to call them belligerent nations, but these nations that have upped and left and are navigating independently of the economic bloc?
No, let them start first. I can tell you the beauty of such a trip, because I remember that when we met President President Obasanjo in Pierre, late President General Yadema's hometown when he came, giving us his experience of going round, there was strong enthusiasm that he was out there engaging some of these leaders. And everybody was coming up with an idea on how to strengthen not just the region itself, but the peace process in Liberia and Sierra Leone, but how to find stability. There's a lot to be gained in one-on-one conversation, Quite a lot to be gained in one-on-one conversation than in an open meeting. So if the president has the energy, I will honestly propose to him that, look, it could take 2 days. He could actually do 7 states in 1 day and then come back, take a rest, obviously, because of his, age, and then do another trip to take spend some time talking one-on-one to these countries. Let them know exactly why you are there. Let them know your determination to hold ECOWAS together and the role every member has to play to ensure that. With regard to these other countries, ECOWAS now would have to take a decision about how to deal with how to react when coups happen in the region. It is now clear that obviously the sanctions, while sanctions do work in some circumstances, it has also enabled the messaging has been wrong, and the coup plotters, the today leadership in a number of these countries, have actually turned it to their advantage, by convincing the people that the sufferings they are going through It's not as a result of the coup or what they've done, but as a result of the actions taken by ECOWAS leaders. Yeah. So you can see that the table has turned against ECOWAS in this region. And ECOWAS must realize this and find a way to deal with it. But look, again, it boils down to the fact that we must find a way of strengthening the democratic process. And that's just the only way out. I don't see any way, because nobody is sure. Nobody can guarantee that. And I said this the last time. Nobody can guarantee in this region today that you will wake up tomorrow. There's a coup somewhere in West Africa. You can't make that guarantee the way things are going. There's demonstration, there's anger all over the region. And that has to do with the failure of leadership. The inability of the leaders to do the right thing. Amarachi, have you ever heard an American president, or a British prime minister, or a Canadian prime minister, or a Chinese leader telling you that leadership is challenging? Of course, no. It's only in this part of the world you hear such nonsense. Because our leaders are not doing the right thing. And so they put leadership into that bracket of being challenged. If they begin to do the right thing, live up to expectation.
Do you think it could also have something to do with their age? Africa has had, some of the oldest, when it comes to age-wise, we've had some of the oldest presidents in the country. The current youngest president, head of state, I should say, is the young man in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore. So you think it may have to do with, the age grade of the kinds of leaders that Africa keeps having?
No, I don't think it has to do with age and marriage. How old was the president of Togo when he took over? He's not prepared to leave power, to the best of my knowledge, How old is the young leader today in Sierra Leone? How old was the president of Benin when he took over? President of Nigeria when he took over? It has practically, I don't think it has anything to do with age. Even if the president is old, his advisors are not old. His advisors are not old, and they are part of the leadership.
Ambassador Keshi, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll hear some good news from Senegal. We hope that the protests die down. We also hope that ECOWAS is able to rein this in before it becomes a much overblown problem. Thank you again, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much for having me, as always. Thanks.
The Minister of Interior, Dr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, has reiterated the commitment of the government towards delivering a seamless and efficient passport experience for Nigerians within the country and in the diaspora. Speaking at the inaugural 2024 Diaspora Webinar Lecture Series of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Dr. Tunji-Ojo says from March 2024, Nigerians will benefit from contactless passport application process, reducing time required to complete the entire process to a maximum of 7 to 10 minutes. The reform is part of the overarching efforts to modernize the Nigerian Immigration Service and enhance service delivery to citizens. The UK Minister for Business and Trade, Kemi Badenoch, is in Nigeria to begin a 3-day visit to the country. Ms. Badenoch's visit on the heels of the former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly in August last year aims to boost UK-Nigeria trade relations and unlock new investment opportunities. During the visit, she and the Prime Minister's trade envoy to Nigeria, Helen Grant, will meet with the Nigerian federal government and state governors, as well as British and Nigerian business leaders and investors. There is growing international concern over Israel's planned offensive to Rafah, the city in southern Gaza, where much of the Palestinian refugees have relocated. According to the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron, over half of Gaza's population are sheltering in the area. Dutch Foreign Minister Hanke Bruinslot says there could be many civilian casualties. Saudi Arabia has warned of very serious repercussions if Rafah was stormed. Hamas has warned that any operation would also undermine ongoing talks about a possible release of Israeli hostages in Gaza.
That's Diplomatic Channel this week. Thank you for watching. You can reach me using any of the social media handles showing on your screen. Amarachi Ubani on Instagram, Amarachi_Ubani on X, and Ubani Amarachi on Facebook. I'll see you next week.